today to our virtual boardroom called The Real Truth About HR Today and What We Can Do About It, that is being facilitated by HR Recruit and Sally Chapman. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Sally, who will introduce herself shortly. Sally is going to share with you some of her experiences about HR for HR and why there is a compelling need for it. If you've got any burning questions during the session, please put them into the chat box facility and we will cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Sally, who will introduce herself and start the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. So lovely to see so many people here and giving up your time as well. And also thank you to Jo, because I think this is about the third time I presented at one of these events, and I always love being given this opportunity. So thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that technology is kind. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Is that good? Yeah, good. Okay. So I shall go into the title and what it's about in a moment, but to set the scene on why I've decided to sort of I come along, and Jo said come along and present this. I was asked to be a keynote speaker for the Association of Colleges HR and Employment Law Conference.
How do I move it to my headphone?
In October last year. So they gave me the idea of what they wanted me to talk about, and I talked about it quite a lot. So the response was frankly overwhelming at the event, and so many HR professionals came up to me afterwards saying that I was completely in their heads. They'd felt this way and they needed to hear this. So I wanted to share it further, and so here I am, here you are. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or so. If you have any questions, thoughts or comments, do pop them in the chat, and then we hopefully got a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions, have a discussion, or sort of what's come up for you. So let's get started. So for those of you who don't know me, who on earth am I? I'm not going to bore you with a whole load of waffle. Just a really brief intro. I've had a really squiggly career into HR. And let's just say I started as a pig farmer. There's a pub landlady in there and a self-employed gardener. And that was all before I reached the world of HR. So I kind of fell into the profession like many people do. And then I sort of subsequently fell in love with it. And I spent about 14 years working my way fairly quickly up to a really senior level up in HR. And for the most part, I really loved it. I loved the organizations that I worked for. I loved the variety. I loved the people. I loved the learning. I loved the pace of work. I loved that being able to make a difference. But as we can all probably relate to, we don't always stay head over heels in love with something forever. For me, there were a number of things that compounded to why I decided to leave the profession mid-2020 and train to coach. The pandemic, I think, was the kind of straw that broke this camel's back, as it was for so many people, especially in HR. And we've all heard it, that need for that case for there's no HR for HR. So I'd spent so much time and energy looking after everybody else, making sure they were all right. I didn't really look after myself. And I didn't really feel very looked after either, if I was honest. That kind of led to a bit of burnout and falling out of love with my job. And I really didn't want to fall out of love with my job. I loved HR. I still do. And I love the profession and the people, which is why I'm kind of still hanging around here, albeit in that coaching space. So I am presenting here today as a proud HR professional, but also as founder of Shine Coaching. So I now coach HR and other professionals on a one-to-one and group basis, amongst other things. So that's enough about me. Let's go back to the beginning and the title to see what this session is all about. So the real truth about HR today and what we can do about it. I'm not sure if it's a really catchy title, but when I was given the brief by the Association of Colleges, their title they gave me was Secondary Trauma and Compassion Fatigue, How to Look After Ourselves. And I was like, oh God, that feels really heavy. So I wanted a title that felt real, but also a little bit inspiring. So hopefully, so this is what I came up with, and it seemed to work, but you'll be the judge of that in about 20 minutes or so. So I am assuming that you, as dedicated HR professionals, you love what you do, but there is absolutely no getting away from it. It is really tough out there. So I want to kind of like talk about how we got here. So that burnout, the compassion fatigue, the secondary trauma, to name a few things. What are the signs that show us when we need to take stock, have a pause for a moment, and then most importantly, what can we do about it? So we've all heard of that, the HR for HR. So I'm hoping this session is going to highlight there's a compelling need for it. And I'm going to share some of my experiences, my mistakes, if you like, that I've now sort of turned into ideas for action because I don't want others to do what I did, knowing what I do now. Because there is stuff that we can do. It's not that complicated. It's the hard bit is committing to it, really, actually doing it and sticking to it. It's a bit like going to the gym, unfortunately. We can't just do it once or twice. We have to keep at it, especially when the going gets tough. So something that I feel has shifted, and I don't know if you feel the same, and changed over the past few years is our big HR challenge. Because I don't think it's about how we can prove our value and get a voice and have a seat at the top table anymore. I think we've pretty much done this, and I think that's rightly so. Now it feels like it's more a case of how can we make sure we look after HR, look after ourselves and our teams so that we can continue to do our best work and we actually want to stay in the profession. So the following slides are my take on things. You're very likely to have your own ideas, experiences, and perhaps some of what I say will resonate, and maybe you'll have more to add. But in no particular order, here are some of what I see as sort of the home and hard truths about HR. So the role has just got bigger and bigger. And yes, this slide is probably simplifying it to make my point, but before it was manageable. And now, how much stuff have we got to do? It has just got bigger and bigger. And if you're lucky, you might have a whole team of people to help you do this, but it's still a lot on your plate. And so much of this sits under the whole organization's responsibilities, not just HR. And these are just the responsibilities. If you add on top what's going on in our world, COVID, the economic and political crises, quiet quitting, the great resignation, we've got a melting pot of stuff going on here. And what if you're standalone and you have to do all of that with no or limited support? And if you ever want to go on holiday or, God forbid, are sick, it just piles up in your absence. And many organizations have that culture of contacting you whilst your out of office is on. And I've been there and I've done it. We tell ourselves there is nobody else to do it. We feel responsible. The person before us did that. You'll get what I'm talking about. These are all valid reasons, but they're also excuses. But we just want to do a good job. We don't want to let people down, which leads me to this. Who wants this? What shall we do with X? I know, we'll give it to Sally in HR, the Christmas party to organise, health and safety, IT, changing the toilet roll. Yes, I had to do that. Why do we get lumbered? And I mean lumbered with all of this extra stuff. It's because we're bloody awesome at what we do. We have a real brilliant reputation for getting stuff done. And we're kind of pants at saying no. So a lot of HR folk, people in our profession, we are drawn to it because we want to help others. We like people. We want to make a difference. The trouble is that when we get busy and we're pushed to the max, this people pleaser in us leads us not to being able to say no or saying yes to the wrong stuff like the Christmas party. So not pushing back becomes a habit. And guess what? Those habits eke into our personal lives. We end up doing the same stuff when we get home for our family, our friends, our neighbours, because we just want to help others. And do we ask for help? No, heaven forbid, not me. I was the go-to person. So by not asking for help, by being so damn awesome at our job, we become that go-to person, the person everyone wants to ask. And for a lot of the time, it feels really great. I know, I've been there and I kind of like basked in that glory of knowing stuff and being able to solve people's problems. It becomes like wearing a bit of a badge of honor. I put so much pressure on myself to know everything because I wanted to have the answer when someone came knocking at my door, which was always open, by the way. So with all of that door knocking and those requests being answered, we become pretty much fully reactive. We don't have time to plan. We don't have time to do all the nice stuff that is actually going to have the biggest impact, make the difference that we all set out to do. And yes, I get it. I have got the t-shirt. I don't know if you can see, I've got a little t-shirt on that says I love human resources on here. There's always a certain amount of reactive work in HR. It is the nature of the people profession. But if we add that to all of the other stuff we do, we end up with no time at all. So how many of you let your own diaries get hijacked with people putting stuff in at the last minute? People not respecting your time. And again, our people pleaser comes to the fore. It always does when we're pushed to the max. So we end up pushing our work to the end of the day or into our own time. Who's guilty of answering emails in the early hours or at weekends? And don't get me started on all this lot, but these are all fabulous initiatives and projects that I love being part of, if I had the time, of course, but they don't just sit with HR. These are whole organisational responsibilities. Yes, HR has a big input, a valuable voice, and will, of course, be able to help drive and coordinate these responsibilities, but they aren't just HR's. And as HR professionals, we're always supporting other people's learning and development, making sure they prioritize it. But when it comes to our own development, we don't just give it the same priority, even if it's booked into our diaries well in advance. We let it be cancelled so we can support others in their time of need. So I've lost count of the number of HR clients that have had to miss one of my group sessions or rearrange a coaching session because an emergency has cropped up. So if we allow ourselves to be the fourth emergency service, we're going to get treated accordingly. So I don't know about you, but I always put other people's development needs ahead of my own. L&D was always on my to-do list. It just never quite reached the top of it. So you can see where I'm heading here. I'm not painting a particularly pretty picture so far. So how much is resonating with you? I don't know if anyone wants to give a thumbs up in the chat if any of this is sounding at all familiar, or they've heard colleagues talking about this or not. Let me go on to move on to the next slide. There's someone in the chat there saying it's sounding familiar, so that's good, or a few people. Okay, fabulous. Right, let's keep going. Okay, so this one I think is a really interesting one, but I do think it's really relevant. Oh, sorry, Claire, I just saw a hand raised. Did you want to ask a question or pop a question in the chat? No? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Pop some questions in the chat and we'll go to them at the end. So who line manages you? I do think this is really relevant. So I'm going to go from my own experience and some of those HR people that I've coached, but quite often we're either managed sometimes by the finance director or the operations director. Now, they can be absolutely lovely people and brilliant at their jobs, but experience has shown, and I am generalizing a bit here and I shouldn't as a coach, but finance bobs not necessarily known for their empathy. They're more about the details and the numbers. And operations, well, they're more about like getting stuff done, productivity, getting results, getting stuff over the line. So when we've got a lot on HR wise, which has a really big impact on us, they're not always the best sounding boards. So who manages us is really important. They need to get you, they need to have your back, and they need to understand HR. So recognition. So how do you feel when somebody thanks you, tells you you've done a great job? You feel great. And that's because recognition builds our resilience. It feeds into our well-being. But just knowing what is on our proverbial plates, the kind of stuff that we have to deal with, what goes on behind those scenes, so much of that is confidential. And it just doesn't get shared because of the nature of what we're dealing with. We don't get a whole staff shout out to say, well done. You've just saved the company X amount of money because you've kept us out of a tribunal, work that will have consumed you for months. It's so unlike any other department, such as sales, that get a shout out for hitting targets, for instance. And we can't get away from it. There is no HR department or person for HR, and there isn't likely to be unless we create and nurture it for ourselves. So I mentioned compassion fatigue and secondary trauma at the beginning. So let's unpick this for a moment. So if an employee is struggling, for instance, maybe perhaps they're unwell, they're struggling with a long-term illness, or they're going through a process, we're likely to have three lots of emotions to deal with. The employee's emotions themselves, the supporting the manager and their own emotions, and have our own emotions as well. So some of these situations are likely to trigger us, even if we aren't conscious of it. And all of this stuff is really heavy, and we don't neatly package it up in a box or file it away and pop it on our desk at the end of each day. We take it home with us. We take it here in our hearts and on our shoulders and in our heads. I know I did. And it is a whole spectrum of emotions to carry around. If you think about it, we are there for every bit of one of these processes, for redundancy, restructuring, absence management, performance management, death and or suicide in service, and so much more. We are there at the forefront for every single piece of negative news. We see people at their worst, hitting rock bottom, defeated, and that whole spectrum of emotions in highly emotional charged situations. They come hurtling away and land on us head on. And we're so busy dealing with the other people's emotions that we often neglect that we have our own emotions tied up in this too. So where is all this heading? This never-ending hamster wheel of being at everyone's beck and call, taking on more and more because we're so good at what we do, mopping up everyone else's emotions, but ignoring our own, not prioritizing ourselves above others. It leads to burnout. And yes, there are varying degrees of burnout and stages to go through, but that doesn't make it any less real, and that it's not going to happen. It happened to me. It wasn't extreme, but it was extreme enough for me to leave a profession that I loved. And it's happened to a number of my clients. And the stats for HR professionals are frightening. You only have to look at this next slide. 94%, I don't know how you clearly you can see that, but 94% of HR professionals report feeling overwhelmed. 98 say they're fatigued and under pressure. And 78 down at the bottom there of HR professionals are open to leaving their job this year. So what are the signs and symptoms? I'm sincerely hoping that none of you are in any stages of burnout. But if you're nodding your head to just one of these on the slide, that's one match gone from your box. So often we'll start to feel sort of it'd be physically ill before we notice some of the other signs. So, that cold that you just can't budge, that's because your immune system is getting shot to pieces by all the pressure, the constant stress that is being put upon you. That cortisol just constantly in your system. Or you might be telling yourself that it makes sense to check your emails at the weekend or on a Sunday night so that you can get ahead of the game on Monday. But those are just stories you're telling yourself. It isn't sustainable to be on all of the time and not have a proper break. Or it could be that you get noticed and rewarded for being the person for responding in an instance, for rescuing the situation, for saving the day. So this is a cultural thing, and it isn't good. The more you do it, the worse decisions you're going to make for yourself, because you will take the path of least resistance. You will say yes to the stuff that you don't want to do and not prioritize yourself and your self-care. So it's far easier to work late and get a takeout and even miss a meal rather than leave work on time and then cook that nutritional supper. Or perhaps you might have noticed a loss of enthusiasm or loss of separation between home and work. You don't have time for your hobbies, the things that you love to do. Or you might have given them up altogether and told yourself they're not important anymore. Or you could be either working in your comfort zone because of loss of confidence, or in your panic zone because you haven't asked for help. So or you might be doing both. Neither are good for you. They both debilitate you in some way or another. Okay, so who wants to throw some proverbial rotten tomatoes at me, because I've printed a pretty big picture. So I just want to check with everyone. You're all still with me? Are they all left the Zoom, Joe, or are they all still here? Shall I carry on?
All still here. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, I shall carry on, because I know what we need, and we need you. I don't want you to leave a profession that you are absolutely awesome at. And ideally, I'd love to make all the stuff I've talked about go away just like that. But I don't have a magic wand, although there have been many a time that I think leaders and managers and colleagues think that HR have got a magic wand stashed in their desk drawer. We don't. And I can't pull a rabbit out of a hat and make it all cute and fluffy again. And I don't think we want that anyway. But what we can do something. In fact, there's loads we can do. We can keep talking and sharing with others, your colleagues, your line manager, your family, your friends. Let them know how you're feeling. You can build and cherish your network. I didn't reach out enough to my network because I felt I had to cope. Felt I had to know everything. But if it's one thing I've learned, we're all in the same boat. And when we start talking to others in our network, people that understand, it's such a relief, such a comfort. We can ask for help and or advice. See it as your superpower. You know how good it feels when you help others. So if you know that by asking for help for somebody else is going to lift them up, you're going to do it so much more often. Asking for help isn't giving up, it's refusing to give up. Have some self-compassion. Be kind to yourself like you are to everybody else. After all, you're an employee too, so treat yourself like an employee. Use your strengths. If you can fill up some of your day just doing some of the stuff that you love doing, which is using your strengths in my book, then you're going to be in such a better place to deal with all the crap stuff that is inevitably going to come your way. Put some boundaries in place and then communicate them to others. I cannot stress how important this is. It is often one of the first things I do when I work with somebody. Without boundaries, we are a recipe for burnout. So a boundary in my book is something that you need or want to say yes or no to that is good for you and your health and well-being. So if that means no emails in the evenings or weekends, or leaving the office at a sensible time, then do it. And telling people that you're going to do it, because if you don't share it with them, they're going to keep pushing you. And recognition, I mentioned this earlier. We need recognition to build our resilience and well-being. So whilst we can't have those whole staff shout-outs, even if we wanted them, we can recognize when we're doing a good job. We can write down the things that we've achieved at the end of each day, at the end of each week. We can share recognition with our team if we're lucky to have one. We can ask our line manager to provide recognition. If we don't ask or offer it, we aren't likely to get it. To build our self-awareness. So this is all about getting to know yourself inside and out, your signs, your symptoms of when things are going well. So you know when things are going well, when you know things are not going well, what triggers you, what energizes you, what lifts you up, who you need in your life, who are your drains, who are your radiators. And resilience, it's a bit of a buzzword, but we've worked out all the stuff that drains our pot, that emotional drain, the long hours, the constant pressure. So we need to know how to top it up. We need strong foundations to thrive. So sleep, healthy diet, exercise, routine, connection, whatever tops you up will be different from me, other members of your team, or the person next to you on the screen. But I know if I don't eat well, if I don't exercise regularly, if I don't learn new things, if I don't listen to podcasts, if I don't take time out with my pets, family, time in my garden, I don't function well at all. We need to help others understand HR. So whether this is your line manager, the CEO, or others in your organization or your family, a lot of what happens or what doesn't happen is because people who don't work in HR just don't get what we do. Reflect regularly. So this is all part of that self-awareness piece, as well as your own development. So find a good couple of questions, reflective questions that you can ask yourself at the end of each day or the end of each week, and build that into your routine. Practice some intentional gratitude. So our brains are negatively wired. It's just the way we evolved. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't change them. We can. We just have to be intentional about our good thoughts. So start a gratitude diary or whatever works for you and keep it going. We have to do it over and over again to create the new positive pathways in our brains. So you've got to think the good thought, write it down, and then share it. Take regular breaks, lunch breaks, breaks for tea or coffee, a break for a walk in the day, holidays, time off when you're sick. Without a break, you're going to end up breaking. Invest in your own learning and development. It's so important for your brain and your well-being, as well as all the other benefits of learning something new. And good thing is you've already made a start because you're all here today. So you're already investing in your learning and development. And that leads on to developing that growth mindset. So how can you become more curious, change your perspective, see mistakes as learning, which has really helped me. I now have that learning mindset rather than I see myself as making mistakes. You don't need to be the finished article. Keep challenging yourself on all of these things. Time management. So this could be part of your boundaries work, but block time out in your diary for prep. Time in between meetings. Have some white space in there. Go through your to-do list, put them in piles of do, ditch, and delegate. Get back control of your time, or else someone else is going to control it for you. So what else is in your control? Your behavior. So this is another part of that self-awareness piece, but such a big one. You can only control your behavior, your response to something, and make it a response, not a reaction. Take a pause and ask yourself, how do I want to respond to this? I say this to clients all the time when they say to me, I can't help it. I'm just a people pleaser. That's a behavior that they're choosing. If it's not working for them, then they're just being stubborn about and hanging on to it. Oh, so be realistic. I know there's an HR in Hero, but there's only so much that we can do. We've all heard about it. You can't drink from an empty cup. We need to put on our own oxygen mask first. When you're trying to do too much or pushing yourself beyond your limits, ask yourself, would I expect somebody else to work this hard, this long, this much? It's all about role modeling that good behavior, what we would expect others to do. So I couldn't not talk about coaching given what I do for a living. So one way is to introduce a coaching culture into your organization. So many of you might be coaches already as part of your role, whether you've trained or not, or realize that you're actually doing it. I know I coached informally quite a lot when I was in my HR role. So if we coach managers so that they can solve their own problems, less work is going to come our way. They will learn to coach their teams, which will free up their time to do the stuff they need to do. It is a win-win. So whether it's one-to-one or team coaching, the benefits of having a coaching culture in an organization are immense. And how about coaching for you? Part of that investment in yourself. I had coaching in my last couple of HR roles, and it was what gave me that coaching bug, but it was also really beneficial in my development, building my self-awareness, having someone hold up a mirror to me, unfortunately, so I could see all of my blind spots, but having that supportive challenge and pushing myself in the right way. So I've also run an HR for HR group program, and then there's so much stuff out there now coming out for HR. I've successfully run 5 of my HR for HR group programs, which I initially called supervision programs. So supervision isn't necessarily a term that's linked with HR, but it's well used in other professions such as coaching, counselling, healthcare, teaching, all those other professions that are engaged with working with people. So when you think about it, HR is the people profession. So it's crazy that they don't have such a thing as HR supervision, or whatever you want to call it. So I have now changed the name to HR for HR because supervision didn't make a lot of sense, because it's not known within the HR profession. So I developed and deliver my own HR group programs, which provide that space for HR professionals, that safe space to offload, to share with others, that opportunity to reflect, discover new tools and techniques, to gain some different perspectives, learn from others, and a time to recharge your batteries and look after your own well-being. So when you put it all together, that is your HR for HR. There's quite a lot of stuff there. And it doesn't have to cost a fortune either. There's a lot of stuff that is totally in your control to put in place. So the world of HR might be hard, it might be changing, but I think it's bright given how far we've come and knowing what we do now. So there's so many times when I have wanted to jump straight back in, especially when working with HR clients or coming and talking about it on days like today. And just to make it even brighter, I've got a little special offer for you. If you're interested in working with me as your coach, I'm offering anyone who attended today a 20% discount. Just use the code on the screen. I always have an initial no obligation chat. I'll let Jo share that link to my calendar that you can book in just to have a chat with me if it's something that you want to explore. She'll send that out with an email. And if the idea for the HR for HR group program is something that interests you, just email me and I'll pop you on the waiting list for the next program. I haven't got any dates yet, but I'll also send out you some information. So all that leaves for me is to say thank you. And is there any sort of feedback or questions and anything in the chat? I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well, Jo.
There's nothing in the chat at the minute, Sally, but if anyone wants to shout out or ask any questions, then feel free.
Can I post? I think, Jo, will you pop the that in the email?
Yes, it will be. Yeah. So I'll send out an email to everybody this afternoon, and there'll be details about how to access a copy of the slides, recording, and there'll be Sally's details on that email as well.
Okay. I did see one question just pop up there.
Yeah. How do you tell others what you oops, it keeps moving. How do you tell others? I've lost it. How do you tell us what you do without giving the game away?
Hazel, I think I take it you might be talking about the sort of that confidentiality. And I know it's kind of like it is a tightrope, but I think there are ways of talking about it, but talking about potentially how you feel, the pressure that you feel, the demands that are upon your time, what the expectations are without having to break that confidentiality of what potentially what process you're going through, who you're dealing with. If you can leave the actual process itself and the individual or the department out of that conversation. Obviously, if you've got somebody in your organization, I think there needs to be somebody within your organization, whether it is the CEO or whether it is your line manager, they've got to have your back. They really do have to have your back. Or it is, like I say, sometimes coming into with groups of people, my HR supervision groups, we do some contracting piece up at front, and everything that we talk about in there is confidential. We've talked about all sorts of different things, performance management, suicide, all sorts of things have come up in that conversation. And I think in HR, we have like confidentiality going through our veins, and it was kind of like a given. And people just felt tremendous support in there, being able to share, knowing that they were in that confidential space, and knowing that others get it as well. So yeah, if it's people outside of HR and you don't want to break that confidentiality, I think it's around just being mindful of not mentioning the actual process and the individual, but more around how you're feeling and the expectations on you. But if you have got somebody in that space that you can share with, then please do. Does that help at all, Hazel? Oh, thanks, Hazel. Thanks for the question. Oh,
Ian put a comment, Sally, which was quite interesting. He said, I don't think the pressures are new, but they are growing. One of the bad bits of HR self-talk is that this is an exceptional year and I need to work longer hours. Next year, it will also be a challenge. Sorry, next year will also be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that slide that I started off at the beginning about HR just getting bigger is that more and more is added on. And actually, I think that is where the conversations need to be, is that our responsibilities, that HR, so many are whole organizational responsibilities, and more is get taken on. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, is like, actually, if I'm doing this, if one more thing comes in, one thing's got to drop out. You've got to have that drop in and be able to have some of those candid conversations with whoever it is, whether it's your line manager or with the CEO, and say, actually, if you're asking me to do this, then I won't be able to do this. I think that's where now that we've got our voice, we need to be using it really wisely. Hopefully you've got a voice within your organization. And again, if this year is an exceptionally hard year and you're working longer and longer hours, you are not going to know that the next year you're not going to be coming back with that same vigor. It's only going to ever increase. That hamster wheel is not going to stop if you keep going. You're not going to be able to build that resilience up. Actually, with productivity, there's some research around productivity, and actually taking breaks away from work, taking holidays, actually does make us more productive. It was something to do with British Airways, strangely enough, because they want you all to go fly away and have a lovely holiday. But yeah, sorry, I've gone off at a tangent. I can see some things about imposter syndrome in the chat.
Nigel's asked, how do you switch off externally? I find even when I'm not working, I'm in HR mode with people in my personal life.
And I think that, Nigel, I think for me, the biggest bit for me and was working with a coach, because I recognized I was doing it, but then I couldn't work out. I needed that mirror being held up to me and actually understanding what I was doing, what I was saying, and also giving permission to the people that you are doing that to actually say, hang on a minute, you've got your HR. But my daughter always used to say, Mum, I don't want HR, I just want to have a conversation with you, please. So I think it's around giving permission for people around you to call you out on it, which doesn't feel very comfortable, very nice, because nobody really likes to be called out on their behavior, but it's giving that permission. But also I did work with a coach to know when I was getting into that, to understand the first signs and symptoms that when that was happening to me, and also switching off. I've found things. There are going to be things. What for me, cookery is a massive thing. I love cooking. And so that is one of the things, because I am using all of my senses. So I find it really difficult for HR to sneak into, or work to sneak into my senses, because I'm reading something, I'm smelling stuff, I'm tasting stuff. There's something visual going on. It's all going on. And so find out whatever it is for you that takes control of the most of your senses, and hopefully that will help you switch off a bit. Was there anything? I saw a lot on imposter imposter. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for your question as well. I saw a lot on imposter syndrome, and interesting enough, on my very first HR for HR program, the group all introduced themselves, and the way we go around, everybody has a little bit of 10 minutes or so to share what's on the top of the mind, the thing that's keeping them most awake at night, that really niggly thing. And we sort of went around the group, and the last person just sat there and said, and she just suddenly blurted out, she says, I have imposter syndrome. And she just burst into tears. And the rest of the group just all said, me too, me too, me too. And so we ended up actually doing a whole like, I suppose we spent a whole hour and a half, that's how long the sessions were, on imposter syndrome and building confidence. And it was something that I struggled with. I came into HR really, really late in my career. You know, I'd done a whole heap of stuff before I came in, and I always felt I had to catch up. But as soon as I started to get over that hurdle of not knowing that I needed to know everything, we're never going to know everything. I've completely changed that mindset to that growth mindset. We are never. There's always going to be something new on our horizon. Someone's always going to put a new blinking law in there. There's always going to be new regulations. There's always going to be an employee that responds or reacts completely different to how any other employee, because we're all individuals. So we're never, ever going to be on top of it. So if we can then put our energy into other things rather than thinking that we need to know it all. And actually, imposter syndrome just means that you care. You know, if we can flip it around like that, it means you care because you want to get it right.
Sorry, I'd missed a question.
Okay.
Asked a question. It was quite a while ago. When is it time to leave? When is it time to leave when we start feeling burnout? And then they've just added something else. And how to come back smoothly without falling again in the same vicious circle.
I think, when is it time to leave? I mean, it's down to individuals. For me, it was, I went through the process of, I knew probably in my last role, I think I should have made the jump, the role before, but I stayed there. And I did it gradually, but I also knew that I had a slight plan in the head. So I'd already got coaching in as a plan. So I think it's time to leave when you've had the conversations, with your family, when you've explored all the avenues at work, and you have actually got nowhere to go. You've reached out to, whether that's your network, your family, your colleague, your line manager, and you've had all of those conversations, and there is absolutely nowhere to go. You keep hitting up a brick wall. If it's making you really, really ill, then go to your doctors, take some time out, give yourself that time and space to think. And coming back smooth, start putting in some boundaries in place. And that's what I would say about coming back smoothly. If you do take a break from HR, decide you want to, perhaps, a lot of people I know that might have gone either to a lower seniority role, or a role with less responsibilities, or a smaller organization, but I think it really depends on the culture of your organization. And it comes a lot down to that, because if you have shared with your line manager or your colleagues how you're feeling, and no changes can be made, there's a culture thing going on there, that they're allowing the person that has the most impact with their people to be feeling this way. So it's looking at the type of organization that you're working for, but also putting some boundaries in place. And if you start putting boundaries in place and people keep pushing back on them, well, then that's the kind of like the sign that you know that actually that's the cultural thing. So be really clear about what's right or wrong. I've got some really clear boundaries now. So a lot of my work is on LinkedIn. So what I do now, and when I first started my business, I was very much I was on my emails all the time. I just basically went from being an HR professional on my emails all the time. And then I came to my business and I was like, I need to be on my emails all the whole time. And then suddenly I realized, actually, I don't need to be on my emails the whole time. You know, like I said, I was being that emergency service, thinking that I needed to respond in the middle of the night. So now I'm very conscious about, actually, my emails are in work time. I don't go on LinkedIn unless it's in work time, because that's kind of like a business medium for me. So it's whatever works for you in terms of that's boundaries. They are very, very personal, but that's why I say a boundary is something that you either need to say yes or no to, that's for the good of your health and well-being. So it can be completely different to somebody else's boundary.
There's nothing else in the chat, Sally. Just lots of positive comments. Oh, wait a minute. Karina's just put something in there. I recently left a role because the ER caseload was unmanageable and was negatively affecting my mental health. So many jobs that I see advertised talk of fast-paced, high complex casework. This seems to be the norm now, and it's really making me question where I fit in HR as ER is so prominent. Feeling lost. Can you help?
Oh, bless you. I have to say, ER was my least favorite. It really was. I used to sometimes break into a bit of a cold sweat, you know, when you get that manager come through the door and they dump this whole pile of poo in front of you and you realize, you know, you've got to go through it. I suppose again, I think that feels like a cultural thing. So I was one of the things that I don't know if you're looking for a new role at the moment. I've just lost your name, actually, Karina. I don't know if you're looking for a new role at the moment, but one of the things that I found really helpful, and I've shared with clients before, is to actually ask the question: is that how do you support employees that are with high workloads? How do you manage employees' mental health? How do you manage employees that are showing signs of burnout? So if you can start asking those questions at interview and you get an answer that makes you feel confident that you know that you're going to get supported, then I think that's like kind of like where maybe a starting point on that. I think it's quite a big it's a big thing. And maybe if the ER bit is so prominent, maybe there are some opportunities. You see, I think HR has got so many transferable skills that we can go pretty much anywhere. I mean, look at me. I'm working as a coach now, and in loads of different organizations with lots of different people. We have got, because we deal with people all the time and we have to deal with a whole spectrum of stuff, we have got so many transferable skills. So whether it is L&D, if that's the thing, or reward or something, so start looking at maybe specialisms that really start to really excite you. One of the things that I ask clients to do is look ahead at your calendar. And if you're looking in your calendar, and I'd call it my love it and loathe it list, and you see things in there and you think, you know, you really loathe something if you put off doing it. And when you're doing it, it seems like it takes forever. And then when you finish doing it, it feels like you've completely knackered yourself out. So that's what I call my loathe it list. The things that I absolutely love are things that I like, look in my diary and go, oh, I can't wait to get started on that. And then when you're doing it, time just disappears. And then when you've finished it, you feel completely energized and want to do it again. So one of the things that I should say to people is have a look at your calendar and see how much time you've got in your love it and loathe it piles, in your lists. And if you've got like, you know, if you've got like 70-80% in that sort of loathe it one, you're going to be wanting to shift. I would say the ideal percentage is to have 70% in your love it and 30 in your loathe it. We're always going to have crap that we don't want to do, but what we need is stuff in that love it area. And love it, some people I know that love ER, they love getting their, you know, really stuck into a good case and picking it all apart. But for others, that's not our bag. You know, that's not what lights us up. So it's working out what really gives you your energy rather than what's going to drain you.
Lorraine's put a really good comment saying, it's a bit like the song of my people. I trained as a counsellor and has helped me to compartmentalise the emotional side of the role and protect me somewhat. I see that others have taken up knitting. I do this and yoga. Having a hobby that requires concentration is great for closing the mind off from those lingering dilemmas we have every day.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to try knit. My sister and my mum knit, and I can't knit to save my life. I would have to concentrate an awful lot. I think I've knitted one jumper in the whole of my, 55 years of life. So, yeah, cooking for me. At least then I get to eat it, because the knitting stuff, then I can't really wear what I produce, but at least once to cook something, I can eat it.
There's nothing else in the chat now, Sally.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions and thank you for your engagement. But like I say, if you've got any more questions, just please do email me. Jo will share my email.
Yeah, so I'd just like to say thanks very much to everyone for joining us. I hope you found it useful. Our next event is next Thursday, the 14th of March. It's actually at 12 o'clock and it's called Fertility in the Workplace. Details about how to sign up will be included in the email that I'll send out this afternoon. If anyone's recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit, FD recruit and exec recruit in the group. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Sally for her time in putting this session together, and also to everyone for tuning in. Thank you.